promise you I'm not. I promise you give me another chance. I promise you gonna see what I'm talking about. Like, I promise you, I bet you gonna see me on that TV doing good.
Adkins will spend 40 years behind bars with the option to review at 25 years.
I am just broken. Her papa and I were already not in good health, and now this heartbreak feels like it's slowly killing us from the inside out. The pain never ends. The image never stops.
How does it feel to be at this point, this first sentencing?
It was really hard to listen to in there, like I said before. Like, I see a 12-year-old boy in there who potentially could have the rest of his life ahead of him, but I also see the kid who shot and killed Camille, and I feel very conflicted.
In July of 2025, a judge in Marion County, Florida, sat across from a 15-year-old boy and sentenced him to 40 years in prison. The judge had been on the bench for more than 35 years at that point. He had seen a great deal, and he told the courtroom that in all of that time, across every case he had ever presided over, he had never once sentenced a 12-year-old for homicide until that very moment.
The firearm or serve life imprisonment with the review after 25 years in the same credit of 825 days. Count 3, be adjudicated guilty of murder in first degree with a firearm on the death of Camille Quarles, and he will be ordered to have a review after 25 years. On count 6, adjudicate guilty of robbery with a firearm, be ordered to serve life imprisonment with a 10-year minimum mandatory and review after 20 years.
That's count 4, just for the record, you say count 6 to make sure.
You're correct. I reversed them. For some reason we use Latin numbers, but count 6, I know. Count 4, I should have said. So on count 4, just to be clear, the robbery with a firearm involving Xavier Velasquez, he'll be adjudicated guilty of that offense or serve life imprisonment. It's a 10-year minimum mandatory, 20-year review period.
That detail is quite unbelievable for most people when they hear it for the first time. But to understand how a 12-year-old ends up in a situation like that, you have to go back to the night of March 30th, 2023, in a small, unincorporated community in Marion County called Ocklawaha, where 3 teenagers were killed in the span of a single night by 3 other teenagers who knew them personally. They were not strangers. They were from the same social circle, the same community, the same small world where everyone knows everyone, and there is nowhere to go where you will not eventually run into the same faces.
When I heard that Layla was shot twice in the head and that she survived and she's in the hospital under critical care, I had Layla in one of my classes, I believe, this year. And after that, she stopped coming to school for a little while. Then I heard about this happening.
Layla Silvernail was 16 years old. She lived in the Ocklawaha community in Marion County, the kind of small, unincorporated Florida town that does not make the news unless something goes wrong. She was a teenager, living the kind of life that teenagers in small rural communities live, close-knit, familiar, with the same faces showing up in the same places year after year.
We are shocked not only are the victims juveniles, but the murderers are juveniles as well.
The people who knew her would later speak at sentencing hearings, making sure that a courtroom understood who she was before she became a case number. She had her whole life in front of her, and the car that would later be used to dispose of one of the other victims' bodies was Layla's own vehicle. Michael Hodo Jr. was 17. He was a year older than Layla, a young man from the same community, part of the same social world that connected all 6 people involved in what happened that March night.
Young men will spend the rest of their lives in prison for the roles prosecutors say they played in the deaths of 3 teens in 2023. Investigators say they, along with Christopher Atkins, who was 12 at the time, murdered their friends as they robbed people.
His father and family members were present at the sentencing proceedings, and what they said in that courtroom about their son, about the future he should have had, about what had been taken from them, was the kind of statement that a judge has to sit with long after the hearing ends. Michael was found along a roadside. He had been left there after being shot in the head, in the open, where time would eventually deliver what the people who left him there were hoping to avoid. How did 3 teenagers end up dead in a community where everyone knew everyone? What happened between the people involved on that night? And what does a judge say to a 15-year-old boy standing in front of him for something he did when he was 12? Layla Silvernail was 16 years old. She lived in the Ocklawaha community in Marion County, the kind of small, unincorporated Florida town that does not make the news unless something goes wrong. She was a teenager, living the kind of life that teenagers in small rural communities live, close-knit, familiar, with the same faces showing up in the same places year after year.
They deserved the full extent of the law.
The people who knew her would later speak at sentencing hearings, making sure that a courtroom understood who she was before she became a case number. She had her whole life in front of her, and the car that would later be used to dispose of one of the other victims' bodies was Layla's own vehicle. Michael Hodo Jr. was 17. He was a year older than Layla, a young man from the same community, part of the same social world that connected all 6 people involved in what happened that March night. His father and family members were present at the sentencing proceedings, and what they said in that courtroom about their son, about the future he should have had, about what had been taken from them, was the kind of statement that a judge has to sit with long after the hearing ends. Michael was found along a roadside. He had been left there after being shot in the head, in the open, where time would eventually deliver what the people who left him there were hoping to avoid.
In count 5, robbery with a firearm, I misread that. It's count 3. Count 4 is robbery with imprisonment. Count 5, robbery with a firearm. He will be ordered to serve life imprisonment. Count 6, let me go back. Count 4 and 5, he's adjudicated guilty of robbery with a firearm.
Judge, he's only charged with 1 robbery firearm in this case. That
Fair
other
enough.
robbery is Mr. Robinson. Yes.
I'm trying to read this and
Yes,
think
sir.
at the same time. He's adjudicated guilty in count 4 of robbery with a firearm as a B defendant or serve life in imprisonment. Count 5, he is not in that offense.
Correct. But that wasn't part of the plea offer either. Count 5.
I'm trying to read a lot of things at the same time, but I appreciate it. He's not in count 5. Count 6, adjudicated guilty of tampering with physical evidence, ordered to serve 96.225 months in the Department of Corrections. I do also find that he killed or attempted to kill the victim, Michael Hodo, in these cases, that he directly killed Mr. Hodo by shooting him with a firearm. So he will be ordered that he can have, that his date for a review will be after 25 years from the date of the offense.
Camille Quarles was 16. She was found last, in the worst circumstances of the 3. The car she was locked in had been driven to a body of water and partially submerged. Whoever put her there was not trying to leave her to be found quickly. They were trying to make sure she stayed hidden long enough that the trail went cold. The fact that investigators located the vehicle anyway, that the evidence inside it held despite being submerged, and that it would ultimately help build the case against the people responsible, is one of the few things in this story that moved in the direction of justice rather than away from it.
At some point, these 3 individuals turned on our 3 victims and murdered them. 2 of them right there.
All 3 of them were young enough to be in high school. They were also a part of a social circle that included the people who killed them, which is why their paths occasionally crossed regularly in the way that paths cross in small communities where there are only so many places to go and only so many people to know. That familiarity is what makes the violence so difficult to process. This was not random. These were people who knew the faces of the individuals pointing guns at them, and that knowledge did not protect them. Ocklawaha is a small, unincorporated community in Marion County, Florida, situated between Ocala and the Ocklawaha River. It is the kind of place where the population is small enough that social circles overlap constantly, where teenagers from the same area grow up knowing each other by name, by reputation, by association. Investigators from the Marion County Sheriff's Office and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement described the killings as gang-related robberies among acquaintances that escalated into executions. The robberies were the stated purpose, but the executions were what the robberies became when the people carrying them out decided that leaving witnesses alive was a risk they were not willing to take. Forensic evidence connected the scene to the people responsible, and by April and May of 2023, all three perpetrators were in custody.
We now head to the Sunshine State of Florida. Happening today, 2 teens who were involved in the triple murder of 3 other teens in Marion County will be sentenced. Detectives say the 3 teens were all involved in low-level gang activity. The triple murder happening back in 2023. We want to check in now with Fox 35 Orlando's Amanda McKenzie. She joins us live from the Marion County Courthouse. Amanda, good morning. We're learning 1 teen was sentenced yesterday.
That's right, and the judge said in his 35-year career that he had never seen a 12-year-old charged with homicide. Christopher Atkins was sentenced yesterday. He's now 15 years old and was given the minimum sentence after pleading guilty. He will spend the next 40 years in jail convicted of homicide, armed robbery, tampering with evidence, and a separate battery committed while in jail. The teen spoke in court right before he was sentenced.
I think like it's just y'all think I'm bad. I'm not. I promise you I'm not. I promise you give me another chance. I promise you gonna see what I'm talking about. Like I promise you. I bet you gonna see me on that TV doing good.
Families of the 3 victims, Layla Silvernail, Camille Quarles, and Michael Hodo, were all in the courtroom, all crying, cursing, and asking for the maximum penalty for Christopher Atkins, who was 12 years old when he shot and killed 16-year-old Camille Quarles. The triple murder happened on March 30th, 2023, when 6 kids were riding in a car together. There was an alleged plan to rob a 16-year-old at gunpoint. Atkins says Taj Bruton, for reasons that are not clear, shot Michael Hodo. Then Robert Robinson shot Layla Silvernail, which led to her car crashing. When they got out, Atkins says Robertson threatened to kill him and his family if he didn't shoot Camille Quarles. He did, and then says Robertson shot her and again in killing her. Atkins has a month to appeal his 40-year sentence. As for the other 2 teens that are co-defendants in this case, Bruton is scheduled to be sentenced today at 9 a.m. and Robinson at 1:30 p.m. Reporting live from the Marion County Courthouse, Amanda McKenzie, back to you.
All right, Amanda, thank you so much for that detailed timeline. You and your team have a great rest of your day.
Arrested in the weeks following the killings, before the community had fully processed what had happened. The timeline of what happened on the night of March 30th into the early hours of March 31st, 2023, was reconstructed by investigators through forensic evidence, witness statements, and the physical locations where each victim was found. What emerged was a picture of 3 separate acts of violence carried out in close sequence by people who were coordinating with each other. On that night, 6 teenagers, 3 who would become the killers and 3 who would become the victims, were riding around together in a car. They were all acquaintances from the same loose gang-affiliated circle in Ocklawaha. The group had been committing low-level armed robberies earlier in the night. Around 6:30, 7:10 p.m., neighbors near a residence heard a single gunshot and saw a white sedan speeding away. The 6 teens had just robbed a man at gunpoint in front of that house. The victim wasn't seriously hurt in that robbery, but the fact that he was shot brought a disagreement between them, since the gun they carried was simply to scare the victim and not to be used. This soon led them to turn on each other. Later that night, around 10:48 p.m., the same 6 teens who were still together in the car stopped near Forest Lakes Park to argue amongst themselves. Layla Silvernail, who was actually a member of the group, was suddenly shot in the head at close range by their leader, Robert Robinson. Robert Robinson, the oldest of the 3 perpetrators at 17, was the person at the center of the planning. He would later say in court that he decided to kill the 3 victims because they disagreed with him and were going to snitch on him. Lila was left bleeding on the ground beside a dumpster. A neighbor heard 4 or 5 loud pops, went outside and found her still alive but critically wounded. Paramedics rushed her to a hospital in Ocala, but she died from the gunshot wound.
Details are slowly emerging in the investigation into the 3 teenagers shot and killed in Ocklawaha. Marion County Sheriff's deputies are retracing the location of one of the victims' vehicles.
Deputies say they're trying to determine where this 2015 Chevy Cruze was between last Thursday and last Saturday when the first and last victims were found. Deputies say the car was pulled from a pond on Saturday with the body of 16-year-old Camille Quarles inside. The car belonged to 16-year-old Layla Silvernail, who was found Thursday night. Silvernail died in the hospital Tuesday.
When I heard that Layla was shot twice in the head and that she survived and she's in the hospital under critical care, I had Layla in one of my classes, I believe, this year. And after that, she stopped coming to school for a little while. Then I heard about this happening to them.
My investigators have been on this nonstop, and they are going to come to a resolution in this case, and we will make an arrest.
Sheriff Woods also says the 3 victims were friends and were together before their deaths. Deputies are currently pursuing multiple suspects.
A short time later, the group moved just 0.4 miles away. Another member of the group, Taj Bruton, shot his friend, Michael Hodo Jr., in the head. His body was left on the side of the road. It was discovered the next morning by someone driving by. The remaining teens drove a few miles south to the area of Malauka Loop. By now, Camille Quarles was the last victim. The leader, Robert Robinson, threatened to kill Christopher Atkins, the youngest member of their group, if Atkins didn't shoot her. Atkins shot Camille multiple times. Her body was placed in the trunk of Lila Silvernail's car. The car was then driven into a pond and left partially submerged so the body would be hidden.
And bear with me because I'm trying to read a computer and do all this. Anyways, on case 23 CF 2935 has been adjudicated guilty of grand theft of a motor vehicle, 3rd-degree felony. Be sentenced to 132.3 months in the Department of Corrections. How much credit does he have?
800 and
Can it be the same credit for everything?
well, since he's been in the Marion County Jail, Judge, 800 and I believe it's 61 days. I'll double check to get back.
Yeah, let me know what the credit is. So we'll figure out the credit in a second. On that case, there's a $100 fine. Court costs, $100 cost of prosecution. And I think you were privately retained, sir, is that correct?
I have been privately retained,
Okay.
yes, sir.
So $100 cost of prosecution, $100 fine and court cost. 132.3 months Department of Corrections.
And Judge, just to be clear for the record, he was represented previously by RCC on those counts. That they were his attorney when he entered the plea, and then Mr. Morrow stepped in on the burglary and the theft case. Just to be clear.
Yeah. I think Mr. Morrow did the work on most of these cases. Is that correct? But well, let me just go back. On these cases, there was RCC.
Correct. On these cases.
On the small
RCC.
cases.
On the small cases, yes, sir.
Mr. Morrow, I stand corrected.
Judge, I apologize. I'm just on the homicide case, sir. I apologize.
You're right. Do we have his attorney here for the other cases?
No, we do not. My understanding was that he entered the plea on that, and that he was just going to be wrapped up all at one time with the homicide case. That was all I understood.
Okay.
Judge, to answer your
Is
question.
that everyone's understanding?
Yes, sir.
Is that, I mean, obviously the main cases are homicide cases, is that he's going to be sentenced here on these cases without the attorney who represented him? Honestly, I didn't think of it until right this second.
About it, so yeah, I mean, that was my understanding.
Is that correct, Mr. Robinson?
Moment, Judge, please.
When it was over, Lila had been left near a dumpster, still alive at the time of discovery, but with no realistic chance of surviving. Michael had been left along a roadside, in the open, where time would do what the people who left him there were hoping to prevent. And Camille had been placed in the trunk of Lila's own car, which was then driven to a nearby lake and pushed in until it was partially submerged.
Who was his attorney? Is it Bernadette Russell?
It was Miss Russell. Before that, it was Mr. Yeah, it was Miss Russell was the last person I had him though, yes. Mr. Stone had him prior to that, but yes.
He's fine with that. I thought he was fine with it. He's reconfirmed.
Is that correct, Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
I can always sentence you on those cases another day if you would like.
Oh, yeah, you can sentence me today.
You want Mr. Morrow to represent you as far as the overall sentencing for all of your cases?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right.
Judge, to answer your prior question, 825 days, sir.
825 days.
825 days, sir.
Is that the correct amount, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, Your Honor.
I mean, quite frankly, because he's got a minimum of 40 years.
Her car was chosen as the method of concealment for what had been done to Camille, and the people who made that decision were teenagers from the same community as both of them. The evidence gathered by forensic experts made the investigation clearer, and by April and May of 2023, all three perpetrators were in custody, arrested within weeks of the killings. They were charged as adults, a decision that reflected both the premeditated nature of the murders and the deliberate effort afterward to conceal what had been done. Their cases moved into the adult court system in Marion County, where the process of moving towards sentencing would take the next 2 years.
I am just broken. Her papa and I were already not in good health, and now this heartbreak feels like it's slowly killing us from the inside out. The pain never ends. The image never stops.
How does it feel to be at this point, this first sentencing?
It was really hard to listen to in there, like I said before. Like, I see a 12-year-old boy in there who potentially could have the rest of his life ahead of him, but I also see the kid who shot and killed Camille, and I feel very conflicted.
For the families of Layla, Michael, and Camille, the arrests were not a relief. Relief is the wrong word for what it feels like to learn that the people responsible for your child's death are in custody. What it provided was a framework, the beginning of a legal process that they would now have to stay present inside if they wanted the eventual outcome to carry the full weight of what had been taken from them. They understood that from the start, and they stayed in it through every step.
I am just broken. Her papa and I were already not in good health, and now this heartbreak feels like it's slowly killing us from the inside out. The pain never ends. The image never stops.
By the time Robert Robinson stood for sentencing in July of 2025, he had been 19 for some time, and the 2 years of proceedings between his arrest and that courtroom date had allowed the prosecution to build a case that covered the full scope of his involvement in all three deaths. He pleaded no contest and received 5 life sentences plus over 132 months in additional penalties. He will not leave prison.
The firearm or serve life imprisonment with the review after 25 years in the same credit of 825 days. Count 3, be adjudicated guilty of murder in first degree with a firearm on the death of Camille Quarles, and he will be ordered to have a review after 25 years. On count 6, adjudicate guilty of robbery with a firearm, be ordered to serve life imprisonment with a 10-year minimum mandatory and review after 20 years.
That's count 4, just for the record. You said count 6 to make sure.
You're correct. I reversed them. For some reason we use Latin numbers, but count 6, I know. Count 4, I should have said. So on count 4, just to be clear, the robbery with a firearm involving Xavier Velasquez, he'll be adjudicated guilty of that offense or serve life imprisonment. It's a 10-year minimum mandatory, 20-year review period.
The sentences were structured to guarantee that outcome, and the judge delivered them with the direct impact statements of 3 victims' families on the record in front of him. Taj Bruton was 16 at the time of the murders, and 19 when he stood in court the day after Robinson to receive his sentence. He also pleaded no contest. His sentence was 3 life terms, 1 for each murder, plus additional time for armed robbery and tampering with evidence. The tampering charge carries meaning beyond its legal category. It showed what the evidence established about the deliberate effort to conceal what had happened that night, to push a car into water, to put distance between the perpetrators and the bodies of the people they had killed. Like Robinson, Bruton will die in prison.
Information for this case. I weighed all the evidence that's been presented by the defense, including Dr. Kropp's evidence. I've weighed all the arguments that have been contained by both. But I've also weighed the circumstances of these offenses. And the defendant's participation in these offenses, which is also a part of the 921 statute. Without going into great length and having to recap all that has been said here, the overwhelming thing is that he orchestrated the death of 3 juveniles without any pretense or any justification in any sense whatsoever. He did that at the time after cutting off his electronic monitor for a juvenile offense, for offensive carjacking. He did this offense within a couple of months of being placed on the electronic monitor.
Christopher Atkins was 12 years old when Camille Quarles was put in that trunk. He was 15 when he stood in a Marion County courtroom and entered a guilty plea to first-degree murder, armed robbery, and tampering with evidence. He had also accumulated a separate battery charge during his time in custody since his arrest, adding another layer to how the court assessed his behavior and what trajectory he appeared to be on. In his sentencing hearing, he expressed remorse directly and asked the judge for a second chance.
I promise you I'm not. I promise you give me another chance. I promise you're going to see what I'm talking about. Like, I promise you, I bet you're going to see me on that TV doing good.
His attorney presented the coercion claim, the argument that a 17-year-old had threatened the lives of his entire family if he did not pull the trigger. The judge acknowledged all of it fully, before sentencing Atkins to 40 years in prison, the mandatory minimum under Florida law for first-degree murder. He will be eligible for a sentence review after 25 years, at which point he will be in his late 30s. Whether that review leads anywhere is a question the law has left open. What the judge said before reading out that sentence, the statement that in over 35 years on the bench he had never once sentenced a 12-year-old for homicide, was not a softening of the penalty or an expression of doubt about the decision. It was the honest testimony of someone with decades of experience in that room, telling everyone present that this case had brought him to a place he had never been before. He applied the law exactly as it requires, but he made sure that what the law was being applied to was fully understood by everyone in that courtroom before he did. The sentencing hearings took place across 2 consecutive days in July of 2025, more than 2 years after the murders. Atkins was sentenced on the 22nd. Robinson and Bruton were sentenced the following day. The families were present across both days. They had waited more than 2 years for those hearings, and during the victim impact portions of the proceedings, they spoke directly to the court about their children, not about the defendants, but about the specific, irreplaceable people who had lived in their homes and their lives before March 30th, 2023.
I am just broken. Her papa and I were already not in good health, and now this heartbreak feels like it's slowly killing us from the inside out. The pain never ends. The image never stops.
They pushed for maximum sentences not because they believed that more prison time could give them anything back, because nothing can, but because they believed that what Robinson, Bruton, and Atkins had done demanded consequences proportionate to the permanence of what they had taken. Atkins was sentenced to 40 years in prison, while Bruton and Robinson were both sentenced to life. For the families of those 3 kids, the sentencing didn't fix anything. Those families still wake up every morning without their kids. That doesn't stop because a trial ended. And it's not just the victims' families either. The families of the 3 who did it, Atkins, Bruton, and Robinson, are also going through something. Their lives changed that night too. But here's the thing about Atkins that really is disturbing. He was 12 years old when this happened, and he said in court that he only did it because the older kid, who was 17, told his family would get hurt if he didn't. And if we think about it for a second, that actually isn't the same as someone who just decided to go out and hurt people. He still got 40 years because the judge wasn't letting that slide, but it shows you how this stuff works. Older people use younger kids to do the dirty work, and a child ends up destroying his whole life over someone else's decision.
I am just broken. Her papa and I were already not in good health, and now this heartbreak feels like it's slowly killing us from the inside out. The pain never ends. The image never stops.
How does it feel to be at this point, this first sentencing?
It was really hard to listen to in there, like I said before. Like, I see a 12-year-old boy in there who potentially could have the rest of his life ahead of him. But I also see the kid who shot and killed Camille, and I feel very conflicted.
He won't even be up for possible release until he's around 37. By then, he'll be a completely different person than the scared 12-year-old who was standing in that field. But none of that changes what happened to Layla, Michael, and Camille. These were kids from a small town where people knew them by name. They had friends, they had families, they had stuff to look forward to. They never got to graduate, never got to figure out who they were becoming. And the people who took that from them grew up in the same neighborhoods, went to the same kinds of places, and knew the same kinds of people.
I am just broken. Her papa and I were already not in good health, and now this heartbreak feels like it's slowly killing us from the inside out. The pain never ends. The image never
That's the
stops.
part that sits heavy. This wasn't some random attack from strangers. This was the same community tearing itself apart in one single night. May Layla Silvernail, Michael Hodo Jr., and Camille Quarles rest in perfect peace. Layla was 16 years old, Michael was 17, Camille was 16. They were children living inside a community that knew their names, and they deserved to grow up inside it. They also deserved the ordinary future that was taken from them on a single night by people who should have protected them instead. Even though all three perpetrators paid for their crimes at the end, it's still not enough. Nothing would be enough. But at least justice showed up this time. Let me know what you think in the comments section below.